And we are live. Hey guys, thanks for coming into this session. Feel free to put in the chat where you're from. You've got two English guys here, so hopefully our accents are not too off-putting for everyone. So yeah, we'd love to know where you're all from on this morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. We had some, I think we had people from everywhere in the world yesterday, so it was fantastic. So we'll let people trickle in, John, and then we will
London, Utah.
Oh, London, there we go. So there's a good, yeah, you've got two British accents on here.
Yeah.
Sasha. Utah,
Utah,
Canada, nice.
Yeah, cat, hi cat.
Lovely. And just give it a couple more seconds. Oh, another. Yeah, it is rainy in London.
Yeah.
Tony, yeah. I'm off to Tenerife tomorrow for my holidays, so I can't wait. John and I were just discussing that, so no, looking forward to it. Lovely. Well, I think we've got a good crowd coming in. Oh, lovely. Britain, sunny Dubai. That sounds nicer than being in London at the moment. Oxford, nice. Hi, Darren. Lovely. Hello, everyone. So thank you for joining us for StoryQuadrant, Storytelling in Business, Part 1 with John Billett. Now, my name is Tom McLeod, and I am a Senior Enterprise Account Executive here at Consensus, and I will be moderating today's session. DemoFest is presented by Consensus, and Consensus is leading the world into a new era of demo automation. Our platform gets your buyers what they need when they need it. It then multiplies your revenue team's impact with unique insights on those buyers. As a result, you will see faster close times, larger deals, and higher close rates. We've heard it from Keith at Lucid already. You can learn more about goconsensus.com on our website, or you can view the automated micro demo. We're a demo automation company after all. You can have a look at that in the link in the Docs tab on the right of your screen. Now, we encourage you to participate in today's session. On the right of your console, you can see a few ways to engage with us. The chat function, as you know by now, will allow you to engage with us as well as the other attendees. Throughout the session, there will be some polls. There's going to be a poll actually at the start of this to kick it off. So we do encourage you to participate, as your feedback is really important to us. Our speaker, John, will be taking questions from the audience at the end of the session. So obviously, please put those in the Q&A throughout the session, and then we will get to those at the end. And if at any time you're having technical difficulties, you can just click on that gear icon at the bottom of the screen, and you can see a help document to help you troubleshoot through the common issues. And now I would like to introduce our speaker. And who better to learn attention control and storytelling from than a member of the Magic Circle? That's amazing. He's got 15 years experience as a distinguished solo engineer and as a creator behind Salesforce's global storytelling platform. Now, John offers a unique blend of educational structure, presentational expertise, storytelling, and a bit of magic. And I've had a sneak preview of this session already, and I promise you it's going to be absolutely incredible. No pressure, John. John's diverse background enables him to guide attendees through an immersive and engaging learning journey and ensure that more actionable results are in their kit bag the very next day. And so with that, John, I am going to hand this back over to you. And I think we're going to start off with a bit of an intro.
Thank you very much, Tom. And thank you, everybody, for choosing this session today. So right now, you are armed and poised with deadly distractors by your side and on your desktop. Distractors that could kill the impact and effectiveness of this presentation, and actually any presentation or demo in the future. These are mobile devices, apps, and browsers, only seconds, inches away from transporting you to a place far less dull. But I don't want that to happen. None of us want that to happen, especially when we're presenting and delivering demos. But when we're in those situations, we are vying for the attention of the audience every single time. And there are a few words that get mentioned a lot, and attention is one of them. We talk about this thing very, very frequently. We don't necessarily know, though, whether attention spans are actually shrinking or evolving. People today need to be really skilled at quickly filtering information and processing information and switching between tasks and engaging with content in much shorter bursts. And if you think about the context of presentations, demos, and communication in general, understanding your audience and catering to their attention requirements is crucial to the success of that session. Employing strategies such as concise messaging, engaging visuals, interactive elements, and storytelling can all come together to really harness and control that attention, regardless of what the perceived trends are actually are happening. But what I've realized from a storytelling perspective is that often people lack confidence and don't have a framework. And if you don't have a framework, you can't really use the skill to your advantage, because storytelling goes way beyond creating a narrative for one specific part of a presentation or a demo. Is much bigger than that. Right, before we go on, we're going to ask you 2 questions in a poll. So here's the first is, do you consider yourself to be a good storyteller? I've asked this question to thousands of people, and it seems a great opportunity to get some insights from a large group. Okay, so 57% no. I think we're up for a few more seconds. Yes, this is good. Okay, we're swinging towards yes, which is great. Is what I like to see. Okay, 26. Okay, that was good. Okay, so the majority of people in this session consider themselves to be good storytellers. That's a great place to start. Let's go with the next question. From your experiences, are more successful sellers better than average storytellers? I've not asked this question before, so look at amazing. Look at that. 16 votes already. Yes. Maybe the 2 just got a little bit lucky, or the 4 got a bit lucky. Right. Great. Thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate you taking the time to answer that. Right. So let's go. The first stop on this journey today will be back to school for about 5 minutes. Nothing more than that, because we're going to look at a very, very brief history of stories. It is believed that we started telling stories around about 100,000 years ago. That's what the current evidence suggests. It could be further. Maybe when we first started controlling flames. And if that's the case, then we're talking about 350,000 years ago. So it's a very long time. Let me tell you a story about a bear. A bear that was chased through a forest by 3 hunters. The bear is hit by one of the hunters, but it doesn't die. It bleeds over the leaves of the forest floor, but manages to escape by climbing up a mountain and leaping into the sky, where that bear became the constellation of stars Ursa Major. Now, there's an interesting thing about this story. Versions of it have been found in Northern Europe, ancient Greece, Siberia, and the Americas. And because we've got this pattern spread globally of the story, it is believed it was being told when there was a land bridge between current-day Russia and current-day Alaska, which dates the story to between 13,000 and 28,000 BC. But where did it come from? Were there 2 people walking across the savannah? One of them happens to glance up at the sky and says to the other, "That looks like a bear." At which point the other person leans against a tree and says, "Funny you should say that. I know how that happened." And here we are 20,000 years later, and that story is still in existence. Now, I think we don't need stories to last that long in our sales cycles. It'd be great if they last a week, a month, for the entire sales cycle. That would be great. But the important thing is, how did that story last for so long? I think maybe because it was an easy story to retell. That's the first thing to keep in mind. Keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate the stories. If we carry on through our evolutionary timeline and we start looking at the introduction of images, now we know the earliest images that have been dated that transfer information from one person or one generation to the next are dated around about 74,000 years ago. So we've got stories at 100,000 years, images about 74,000 years. And if we progress through that timeline, we see text emerge around about 5,000 years ago, and then bullet points in 1990 when we see the first version of PowerPoint. So taking that whole history into consideration, we are very much geared more towards stories and images than we are text and bullet points. And I'll explain a little bit about why that happens later on. But we know that stories help us make sense of this world around us. We process the world in story form. We do. But what about as an SE? Do we tell stories? What sort of stories do we tell? I think most of us know that we should tell more stories and that stories should be used. But do stories really have an impact on value and win rate? Take a moment to reflect. What do you think? Well, in 2006, a New York Times Magazine journalist by the name of Rob Walker decided to run an experiment. And what Rob did, Rob got 100 random objects. Some of those objects he paid for, some of those objects were donated. He paid on average $1.25 for these objects. He then enlisted the help of 100 professional authors. Each author was asked to create one story for one of the objects. He then listed the object for sale with the associated story. And all of the stories are in a book called Significant Objects. One of the stories was a story of a banana, a rubber plastic banana. The story was one-page cartoon strip style story, and it was listed for sale. The banana had originally been bought for 25 cents. It sold for $76. And it happened on every object. He had originally spent $197 on all of these objects. When listed for sale with a story, they sold for $8,000. And because this was a study, all of the transactions were cancelled and they did the test again. Very similar result. And again, very similar result. The conclusion was drawn that stories actually do influence the value and give more meaning to this object. Anyway, so we tried it. I've been working with people for many years and on this subject. And one of the people I was working with decided to try. They had a microwave, a broken microwave. And you can see the listing here was a possessed Panasonic microwave. It was up for sale for $1 because it didn't work. And she wrote a story for this microwave. She wrote an entire story about this possessed microwave. And actually, the comments in the free ad site came in thick and fast. People really enjoyed this story. They thought it was funny. And eventually, a major news publisher picked the story up, as did a radio station, and broadcast it to their listeners. And the microwave sold for $64, not $1. But then Panasonic found out about this possessed microwave and then made a donation of $1,000 to charity just because she wrote a story about a microwave. But great tech products sell themselves, right? We don't need a story to sell them. Well, apparently it helps. And it might be obvious to us as an account manager or as a solution engineer, if we work for a company whose technology is genuinely amazing and you're behind it and you think this product is just unbelievable, it should just sell itself. Why wouldn't people buy it? Well, this scenario does happen, right? People don't just buy stuff. Apparently, we can't just tell people what to do. We can't tell them to buy a product or a service. Nobody really likes to be told what to do. I don't. I'm guessing most of you don't like to be told what to do. This is called psychological reactance. I think most people know we should eat less salt, we should eat less sugar, we should exercise more. Information alone is not enough to change behavior. And actually what happens, and I know this happens to some technology companies because I've had this conversation with them. Are you ever perceived as a threat? The answer is yes. And if you are ever perceived as a threat, that creates anger and counter arguments, which then drives attitude. And that's a really bad place to be in the sales cycle, right? Really bad place to be. However, if you take a different approach, you start with a story, you can use something called transportation theory. Because I know that you have all got some amazing stories to tell. They're not case studies, they're your stories. The stories that you've got inside that you never really allowed to surface, and you framing them in a way that you can just reel them out when you need them. And sometimes we need to stop and just tell these stories and write them down and realize actually that's a really good story. But if you do that, take the time to construct it about a person. Make sure it's a person-centric story rather than a brand-centric or a company-centric story. Because stories do motivate people. And when you tell a story, they can create change. And you'll find that stories are processed really, really intensively. And ideally, they are not criticized because if you tell a story from somebody else's perspective, it's quite difficult to criticize somebody else's story, especially if it's a true story. And there's that word again, curiosity. Stories create curiosity. And when you start to tell stories and use stories, ideally there becomes a point when you're telling a story from somebody else's perspective that you have this transportive experience in the listener and they can draw their own conclusion. It's a great way to communicate. Now, if you aren't controlling the attention of your audience, they can decide where it goes. So you have quite a responsibility. And I'm going to share with you a scenario that, not a scenario, it's a situation that unfolds for all of us nearly every day when we have meetings. So here we go. This is the meeting timeline. Every meeting that you will ever be in follows the same format. It has a beginning and an end. We know that. However, if you are listening to me or the presenter and your attention is on them because you find the content is engaging and interesting, your attention is up here. And if your attention is up there and you're listening to the presenter, you will take away lots of memories. It's that simple. If you are on Slack or you're distracted by something else, your attention is down here and you'll take away fewer memories. Just the way it goes. When we first start meetings, how long have we been going now? Maybe, I don't know, about 10 minutes or so. We've got a high point where we're all well engaged, well motivated, and our attention is pretty high. Some of you, like me, settle down. The first thing you do is you want to get a nice cup of coffee to start, and you sit down and you start to relax and enjoy this meeting or this presentation. Now, unfortunately, we have all done this, and we have all been on the receiving end of this. The moment the presentation gets presented and that PowerPoint button gets pushed, make or break. If the content and the delivery doesn't connect with the audience, our attention does this pretty quickly down here. And we start thinking about other things. It might be, what did we watch on Netflix last night? Actually, I've just finished watching Baby Reindeer. Terrifyingly good story. I don't think I'll be watching that again, but very, very good show. It might be that you're thinking, did you order that book that you meant to order from Amazon? You can get away with this right now because I can't see you and you can do what you like, right? Do you need to get milk on the way home from the office? And you think about all of these things. And then at some point, there will be a moment where you realize, oh, I'm not listening. And I need to check this back in. I've got to force myself to listen. I'm really going to try. And it goes up here. This is the good thing about being remote, right? Because if I look, Pam, if I could see you, Pam, and I asked you a question and you're not listening, the easy way out for you is just to say that your Wi-Fi froze. Could you repeat the question? That's the good thing about being remote. It's quite awkward if you're actually in a face-to-face scenario, but this still happens. And then we desperately try to focus and this happens again. And it's off. And we're drifting off thinking about something else, something way more interesting in this scenario we're in. But there is always a moment of hope where somebody says in summary, before we go to wrap up, or somebody knocks on the door and says, I've got this room booked from 4 o'clock, right? This is it. This is the most important thing. And that's it. I'm going to listen now because I'm right, done. This is how every meeting goes. But this is interesting, right? This is the thing people remember most. This is the theory of recency. The thing they remember most is the thing they heard last. And also the feeling that gets created is also really important. The second thing people remember the most is the first thing they hear, they've heard. Now, these ideally, I'm going to touch on this very briefly. These should be linked. They should be linked. Whether it's a story arc or a through line that you're running through the session, presentation, demo, they should be linked to create this solid end-to-end messaging. Because if you say something really important at a low point, is not necessarily going to get heard. We know that this period of time, or currently we think this period of time is only about 7 minutes. 7 minutes to really, if you get to a threshold of 13 and you've really lost people, it's hard to get them back. So you need to do something here to ensure that happens. And this is why we use engaging openings, hooks, stories, visuals to try to keep this attention high. It takes a bit of practice, but it's achievable. This is the result that we want, right? This is what we're after. Now, with all of this in mind, let's come back to the present day, this situation that we're in right now, in this very, very fancy meeting room at DemoFest. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to make memories in you. That's it. I can't force that knowledge into you, though. You've got to welcome it. It's almost like a vampire. But I've got this responsibility. I have to control your attention. So you are right now using the same brain to listen to me as you do when you do the things that you love, your favorite hobbies, pastimes, the movies that you really enjoy, the books that you love reading, the TV shows that you like watching. It's the same brain. You're not switching out a different brain for this session. So what do I need to do? I need to give it variety. I need to give it interest. I need to create curiosity. I need to feed it. I need to give it stories. Because do you know what happens? If you don't, things become invisible. I'm going to make something vanish for you right now. So when you look at something for a while, your brain's neurons start to take a break if they think nothing has changed. It conserves energy. So everything else starts to fade away. It's like your brain saying, I've got this, no need to pay attention to the rest. It's all taken care of, no problem. But you've got these kind of lazy neurons at work. Watch this. If you can focus on that little black cross in the screen, you can see there's an image behind it. Now, if you can keep your eyes still and open and look at that cross, in 5, 10, 15 seconds, you will notice that background image will disappear. There are 2 points here. If you've got screenshots in a demo or in a set of slides that look too similar, it can be very easy for people to miss the fact that something has changed. If you've got too much information, we then have got something called the redundancy effect, which is too much information is going in through the eyes and also through the ears. If you're a presenter who's talking over the slides and there's words on the slides, there's a conflict of information and only a very small fraction of that information is retained. The other thing to be aware of, if you've got words on slides, people can read faster than you can read it to them. So by the time you speak a word, they've read it, and what you're saying is old news. You can't have that aha moment. If this doesn't work for you, there's a link in my booth that you can go in and see this on your full screen and experience that image just fading away and disappearing from you. It's quite fascinating, really. So let's go back here. So what the situation I found myself in was thinking about these different stories, because we have stories that have got different purposes, and I ask people what types of story they want to tell. And then this got me really thinking about the situation that most of us find ourselves in. And there are different types of story based on where you are in a sales cycle. Now, I've asked lots of people the question, what types of story do you want to tell? The story that a lot of people lean towards is this one. Success stories. That's a great place to begin. People say, I want to tell success stories and I want to tell engaging stories. And that comes up very, very frequently. Okay, so what is a success story? A success story is a tale of the past, a tale of how you and your technology have transformed and helped another organization. Great, perfect. Is it the very, very first place you would begin? No, because you would never walk up to a complete stranger and say, before I learn anything about you, let me just tell you about how I've made somebody else's life better. Doesn't really make sense. The important things with the success story has got to be relatable, it's got to be relevant. And you've got to have a library of these that you've got to learn. But how do you make it relatable and relevant? You've got to do good discovery. So you've actually got to learn their story. You've got their story. So if you think about it, using a story structure as discovery makes it actually quite an easy thing to do, because it's not a list of questions. You're thinking through the story arc and trying to build an arc around your prospect. And it might be, you might know who you're meeting with, but then if you can figure out what they want and why can't they get it, as soon as you figure who they are and what they want, this then becomes relevant and it has more impact. And you're actually going to build up a really neat story arc about your customer. And at some point in there, you'll realize how your technology can make their life better and how you can improve their organization. But is that the place to begin? No. Why not? Because you would never walk up to somebody and start questioning them without giving any kind of introduction about yourself. So there's a story that comes before this, and it is your story. And you can break this into two. If you think about this, you can only be categorized in one of four ways, give or take, pretty much as another human being. And if you walk up to somebody and because we judge trustworthiness within about a tenth of a second of meeting people, so we're making very, very rapid decisions. And if for whatever reason, unfortunately, we are categorized as a threat, talked about that a little bit already, then that's not a good place to be. We don't ever want to be seen as a threat. What about if you present to somebody and the presentation is not memorable and they don't really listen or they don't really connect with you and they can't remember your name? That would be awful. Just to remind you, my name is John, by the way. You would remain indifferent, and that's not a great place to be. Not a great place to be. Where you want to be is a friend, not best friends, but becoming maybe a trusted advisor, a trusted friend. Yeah, so that's where you need to be. And you have really, it seems to be only about 4 minutes to ensure that you are creating that moment so people know about you. Because the longer it takes for you to really provide enough information about what you're like and who you are, people start to fill in the gaps and the blanks, and they start to make assumptions about what you're like. So, things like self-awareness, your values, confidence, your adaptability, your passion, your purpose, and your vocal variety, all of this feeds into those first few moments of when you have that interaction. Now, bearing in mind, I have asked thousands of people the question, what types of story do you want to tell? Not one person has ever said this to me. Might help if I actually didn't make a mistake. Positioning story, really important. And it doesn't necessarily need a story arc behind that. It should have a through line that identifies trends to give you justification as to why your technology exists. What alternatives are there to your technology? And if your prospect goes to somebody else, what are they going to miss out on? So what are your differentiators? What evidence and proof of value have you got? Because if you don't get that right, there's a strong possibility that there are 4 other vendors who are very, very similar to you, and comparisons will be drawn at that point, which is not a great situation to be in. So having a really, really strong positioning story is well worth putting in the effort. Now, I'm presenting to you right now at this moment in time. And this is not a story, but it will become a story if somebody in this room tells somebody else about it. So this is the last story, is the story they tell, is the retrospective narrative construction. This is why it's really, really important that when you do any presentation or a demo, that you've got good structure, you've got a through line, you've got a theme, whatever you call it, you've got a hook, you've got value, not just about the value that your technology brings, but the value that you bring as a person. Every time you open your mouth, are you going to share some insights that the prospect is going to take away and use? Are you using visual storytelling? Are you using whiteboards? Are you generating curiosity? Because this flow will always start here. And ideally, it will then go here. So once you've done a bit of discovery, you can then take it and show you the evidence that you've done this before you then figure out this is the story I want them to tell after the fact. So there's as you unfold and go through a sales cycle, there are multiple story types that you would use for different purposes through the educational cycle. So once you learn the methodology and you learn about story structures, you then got to figure out how to get people to listen to the story, because it's quite easy for people not to listen to a story. How do you get people to listen? Well, as I said earlier, attention is pretty bad at the moment. These days it's pretty horrific. But you can use hooks. Hooks are used to capture attention and say that you have something worth listening to in the first few minutes of a presentation. They create curiosity, and they should be unexpected, unusual, action-driven, raise conflict. It could be a question, it could be an image, it could be a story. I used to use this hook for many years, and it was, what if I could make your presentations over 1,000% more memorable? The figure's actually 1,160% more memorable, but that sounded ridiculous. So I've rounded it down to the nearest 1,000. That's what I'm going to tell you today. So if you use it as a question, that actually will naturally create curiosity, because there are only 4 ways to really induce curiosity in another human being. So if you say, imagine if, or what if, that's a really good way to create this hook. And if you think about this, you may start to see hooks used more and more once you become aware of what they are and how they get used. And the Disney and Pixar use hooks quite frequently. There was one from many years ago now. It was The Incredibles. What if superheroes were banned from saving people? Most superhero movies at that point were about saving people, but what if they were banned from saving people? There was one, what if a rat became a gourmet chef? There's Ratatouille. What if video game characters had lives beyond their games? Wreck-It Ralph. And I spent lots of time listening to vendors doing short presentations on their technology. And I realized actually after 10 minutes, sometimes it's still hard to know what a piece of technology is actually bringing a value to an organization. So in those scenarios, I've asked the vendors to create hooks, go away, create a hook in 5 minutes, and then come back in and deliver this hook as a question. And you know what? It worked. It worked really, really well. It works really well. Tesla had a hook in the early days. What if a company created an electric car that was aesthetically appealing? Yeah, maybe cars back then, electric cars didn't look that great. But what if a company created a car that looked aesthetically appealing? So we should be trying to figure out how is the best way of getting information into people in a way that they welcome that information. And hooks almost a switch to make that happen. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. Not a lot, because it's actually not that interesting, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. I don't like seeing people I know on buses. If I'm not on a bus and I'm on the sidewalk and a bus goes by with people on it that I know, it triggers a really, really odd discomfort within me. And if a bus passes me by and I see people on that bus that I know, it kind of evokes a really, really sort of early twinge of anxiety. I don't like it. And I much prefer to be on that bus, even if it's a dirty, grubby bus packed with people, but I'd rather be with the people that I know than not. It's one of those quirky quirks that I've had for many years. And I don't know, maybe it stems from a time when in my early years and I was in my stroller on the sidewalk and my mum got on a bus and left me. I don't know. She says it never happened. I don't know. I'll believe her. But I don't like that. Right. So I've just told you something a little bit about me, not a lot. And if I now ask you what that picture was about, I encourage you to put information, any information you can recall in the chat, and I'll glance down and see if I can see it. But you probably know what the image is of. based on where you live, if I asked you what direction was the bus traveling, some people will say left or right, and another person will say north or south based on where it was going. If it's an image that's very familiar and you connect with it, some people actually know what's on the bus. And I've tried this for years, and the amount of time these images do stick, especially if you connect it with a story. And even if people know what's behind the bus, and what have we got? Red double-decker bus that's on a bridge going away from Big Ben, bus over Westminster Bridge, driving south Sabine, well done. So here we go, double-decker red bus. Some people know where it's going, some people know the bus number. And it's an amazing thing that happens is because you actually, you process that very, very quickly, and then you listen to the presenter. There's a really interesting layer that happens in the human-to-human conversation at that point. But it's amazing when somebody actually refers back to an image that you've shown them 18 months previously, and they can still remember the details in it. And that for me is the moment I know it. I was smiling at some of the comments. What a bus! Thank you, Bradley. There we go. And to put you out of your misery, that's what it was like. So you actually stop looking at the image pretty quickly, and it's easier to process that. And then you're listening, so you actually reduce the redundancy effect. Yeah, so there we go. It can be all too easy to actually hide behind slides that are too complex to process, and actually while that's happening, your voice, your message is actually sort of fading into the background. Right, moving on. After the hook has grabbed the attention of the audience, it's then the promise of change that keeps the audience engaged and listening. So how are you going to change them? Are you going to make them happier, healthier, wealthier, more inspired? The character must always change in a story, otherwise there's no point to the story, which is why I love whiteboards, because we can do this pretty quickly. And we don't ever really do this with slides. You know that person is not happy. At the end of the story, it can change, and we can simply do that. We know if there's a face like this, that person is frustrated. And with a simple transformation, you can move it and say, look, and there we got a positive transformation. It can be simple, but it's important. So if you need a structure, here's an example structure that you can use to start with your story definition: a character in pursuit of a goal while overcoming a challenge or obstacle. You need those three things. You have to have a character to take on a journey towards a goal. So you've got to have a goal because you've got to take the character somewhere. And if there's no challenge, then it would be boring and it would have been done before. So without any one of those three things, it kind of collapses. So those are the three things you need. Now, let's think about ET. Most people on this planet are aware of ET. And if I said to you, what is the one thing ET wants more than anything else in the world? Most people know instantly what ET's desire is: to go home. Well done, Tom. Just saw that. Darren Ward, love the whiteboarding. Is it some tech? It's very easy. Connect with me and I'll take you through it. E.T., the character, wants to go home. Why can't he do it? There's no communication, no spaceship. Then we've got the police, we've got the scientists, all creating the challenges. And you know what? There we go, E.T. Thank you very much, Sasha. We also know that Liam Neeson always seems to want his daughter back. So we've got our character, we've got our goal, and we've got the challenges created by the kidnappers. So we know that there's this underlying story structure. I'm not going to go through the stages of a story. We often talk about the story structure or the story arc or a through line with stories and demos. My point here is there are a few things that need to be layered over the top that we might not necessarily think about as we start to develop stories. And they are as follows. The first thing is most people on here will be doing demos at some point, I assume, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. Now, if you think about the story arc and how a story is structured, personally, I don't think a demo can ever be a complete story on its own. If you think about it, a demo shows what the future could be like, but it doesn't really show what today is like. So this is why we've got to wrap a narrative around it to create an exposition and what is life like today. So we've got to do good discovery to have a really nice flow through to the demo. However, even within this context, a demo can still incorporate elements of storytelling to engage and captivate the audience. So look at this. This is the way I see it. So you've got your story arc. Most people are happy with that. They know what it is. You can find out the information around that on, on numerous sites. But when you're delivering a presentation that contains a demo, normally the demo for me, it's got one of two places. It can either go at the crisis climax point of your story, or it can go in the inciting incident. Doesn't really matter. For me, it goes there. However, that is the point where we show what the technology can bring and how we can have a much better future. But you need to have your discovery narrative there. So you've got to have some good discovery so you can actually give the demo more meaning to move from here to there. The next thing is trying to make the demo more realistic and richer without having the need to have separate case study slides, because there are two natural points. If you create a story flow like this, there are two natural points where you can embed contextual reference stories. That could be 25, 30, 40 seconds about how another customer, Emma, at whatever company, had a very similar scenario, and you can embed it and actually make it more real because it's closer to that moment rather than finish the demo, go back to the slides as a case study. It kind of pushes all of this together. And then if we've got this underlying arc, you've got a hook at the beginning, and ideally you will answer the hook at the end. So these two are linked. So the hook, this is the promise of change. This is how we do it. And if you've got a character involved, which you will in the arc, the character should have a positive transformation, just like it did on my whiteboard with changing the face from sad or frustrated to happy. The character should naturally go on this transformation and make the character's life better. Now, the word character gets used a lot. So I felt I needed to at least acknowledge that word, especially in the world of a solution engineer or a sales engineer. Characters can be objects. They can be systems, they can be departments. So when we're building a story, we don't necessarily need to build it so every character type is a person. It's anything that really influences or takes part in the story. And it can be something completely inanimate. And then one of the most famous inanimate characters in recent history is this guy. Most of you may even know his name. Most of you may know his name, but there we go. So it could be a policy, it could be a system. Then we've got Wilson. Thank you very much. Nobody left me hanging there. Wilson, amazing, right? Volleyball, but a lot of people know how important that character was to giving Tom Hanks's character hope. It wouldn't be right to deliver a presentation in 2024 without at least acknowledging some AI. And it's a great thing to help you with stories and planning your presentation flows and your demo flows. Just a little bit of prompting and you get something quite amazing. So I thought, well, give it a go. Yeah, and I can, in my question here, on my prompt is that I'm in tech sales and I need help planning a presentation. The presentation needs to be this, 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 and this. Don't start writing yet. Do you understand? Yes, okay. And now I feed it more information. And then I'm actually, as if by magic, there we go, I get my structure, which actually then gives me a really good spine to create my flow, and I know what I need to insert and what I need to create. It's a good start. We can make these screenshots available afterwards. Apologies, I don't know if they're a bit fuzzy. They look all right here. And if we move on, then I ask it to write an informal story. I ask it for an informal story to start with because I want it to change to a story about the main stakeholder whose name was Emma. So I actually change it from an informal story to a story about a character. And then finally, I can then ask it about create me a hook. I need a hook for a presentation. One sentence, it must be provocative. It should be a question, starts with what if and create curiosity within my audience. And the hook it comes back with, for those that can't see it, what if you could unlock the secret to slashing your IT expenses by up to 50% while supercharging your business's efficiency and innovation? So there we go. It's a great tool to even help you build and plan your stories and your hooks. We're entering the last few minutes of this session, and I need to touch on curiosity because I've mentioned that word a few times. You can't make people listen to you, unfortunately. Just one of those things in life. You're not in control of that. But what you can do is you can use your ability to create curiosity in other people. And curiosity is created by telling a good story. Now, one of the most useful things is if at any point during this session I have said something and you thought, I would like to know that piece, you've experienced an information gap. And an information gap is this. So if I give you this piece of information and I give you that piece of information, the piece of information that becomes interesting is the piece I don't tell you. And my gosh, is this useful and valuable to keeping people on the journey with you? It really is. Even if you write on a whiteboard, some percentages and say, you know what, I'm going to tell you what they are in 7 minutes. And then say no more. That's an information gap that people will then need to be filled. And it's a great callback. So here's an example. You don't necessarily need to see this in detail, but you kind of get the idea. If I give you this piece of information and I give you that piece of information, I've then created an information gap because you're going to assume that there are differences now between these two pictures. And the good thing is, if you do ever put pictures like this on your presentations over a virtual session, you can see if people are engaging with your slides because their eyes are flicking left and right as they try to figure out the differences. So we've all experienced that type of information gap in the past. However, if the second picture had been drawn with all of the differences highlighted in red circles, there's nothing left for you to do. So there's no information gap. So your attention will naturally check out and drop until the next part that it gets grabbed and pulled through. So as I leave you, I'm going to leave you with just a couple of things really to take away. Hunt for stories. You've got your own stories. Tell them. Create your own story bank. And if you hear a story that you like, ask for more information, but kind of always be on the hunt for these stories and listen out for them. And once you've got your stories, tell them, learn them out loud like a joke over and over and over again. And I can still remember stories that I used maybe 15 years ago because they stick. They really do stick. And actually, if you couple a whiteboard diagram with a story, that sticks for a very, very long time. So make sure you create this library of stories because it's worth using them. During the history of humanity, we constantly evolve and evaluate and improve everything around us. We need to do the same with presentations, how we interact with our customers, how we create demos, how we deliver demos. Like movies evolve, TV shows evolve. Just because we do something in a particular way, it doesn't mean it's the best way or the right way. Because somebody else might be delivering something else, another story or presentation in a better way than you. You're not to know. So you've kind of got to constantly sort of keep pushing and pushing. And this does include our approach to stories, storytelling, presentations, and demos. It's all in there. There's no doubt that our attention spans are changing. And we've got to make sure we cater for this. I think we all know, we can all feel they're changing. So the next time you prepare for a presentation or a demo, remember you are in this battle for attention. You've got to win that battle. You've got to win it. So use compelling storytelling. It's a powerful way to engage audiences emotionally and intellectually. So make sure you craft that narrative that resonates with your audience's experience. You can captivate them and take them on this journey with you. Think about your opening. The opening few minutes are really important. The opening of your story sets the stage if you've got any hooks you can use, because a hook, a lot of the time, is actually more beneficial for you to use than putting your job description or job title on an opening slide. Start with a thought-provoking question or an intriguing conflict and get people to want to know more. And make sure you've got a clear objective. Even in storytelling, having a clear objective is important, knowing what you want your audience to take away so they can retell the story afterwards. So make sure you structure it effectively and that every element serves a purpose. And now there are endless ways for you to learn about storytelling in business. There are loads of organizations out there with content overflowing just that you can just learn and use until you're sick of the subject. Whichever way you learn about storytelling in business, make sure that the framework is there and that it guides you through not only story creation, but also the different types of story that you need, all the way from your own story, the positioning story, to delivering amazing success stories, and when you use them throughout that sales cycle. Because that's how we harness the power of stories, to keep people's attention and create those memories. And that's it. We're done. So thank you all very much. I hope you got at least one thing from this session today, and enjoy the rest of DemoFest.
Oh, that was so good. Right, we've got a couple of questions, John, if that's okay. We've got 8.5 minutes left, 9 minutes, so they might have to be short stories in response to these questions. So first of all, let's say you have a big library of stories that you can share with prospects. Do you have recommendations for improving your memory recall to be able to tell the right story at the right time?
Yeah. So the first thing is, there's nothing quite like practicing a story. So in a room, shut the door and practice them over and over again. If you can anchor your story to an image, if you can draw your story and link it to a whiteboarding image, what I've realized is if you create a whiteboard graphic for a customer and you link the story to that image, all you need to do is draw the image in your head and the story comes back. It's great. It works really well. So anchoring it with an image and making sure that you rehearse them. It's just like a joke. You've got to rehearse it over and over and over again.
Okay, great. Hopefully that was good, Taylor. Then we struggle to actually have stories to tell due to confidentiality. How do you recommend we expand our story library when we can't share success stories? Or do you have other ideas of how to tell those stories?
Yeah, I think that is a scenario that happens from time to time. And the first thing is, I always say, can you just replace the organization name? Can you shift the data by something to make it still more meaningful? Do you need to actually use that company name? If not, then I've got distracted by somebody's message there. If it's confidential, then you can't share it. It's as simple as that, right? Unless you can create a version of it that just focuses on the facts and not the specifics of the organization itself. But it's still, you could still create a story. Even when a demo, you could say, this reminds me of a company. I can't remember the name, but I remember the person. The person was Emma, and I'm sure that would still work.
Okay. Can you speak more to the introduction of storytelling within Salesforce and how that has potentially increased profit margins for the company or accelerated the growth?
So if you, I can tell you from an analyst perspective, because that's open information, that's information out there in the public, that if you've got a good storytelling platform and you've got a really good storytelling methodology and your sellers fully engage storytelling, your win rates are expected to increase between 10 and 30%. It's really high. It's really high. I've got the exact, I think the figures actually are in my booth. Maybe it's not 10 and 30, maybe it's 5 and 10. It's really high though. I'm sure I put the figures in the booth, so you can go and have a look at that. But it's been proven time and time again that if you use stories in a selling environment, that your win rates will increase.
Excellent. And just a shameless plug for Consensus off the back of that. Obviously, we work with Salesforce. I'm sure everyone can connect with Todd Janssen, who's now joined us from Salesforce, and they saw a 30% increase by using Consensus. And it's part of storytelling. It's having those repeatable stories that you can give to customers, and they 2x their close rate. So having people record stories and deliver them on demand.
The other thing which I would say is the personalization of stories as well. If you can personalize any content, that also impacts win rate significantly. between 5 and 15%. That's a big jump. So personalization and make it meaningful, make it relevant. Yeah, they do create change.
Great. So from Katie, if you're leading a training with a large group of people, how would you incorporate storytelling?
If it was storytelling training, or if it was a training,
I think it's more if you're just doing. I know Katie's a CSM, so if you're doing sort of training, onboarding new customers, or sort of admin training, or some kind of training with new people, how would you build stories?
Funny, because I've been asked this question recently by somebody else, and one of the easiest ways to do it is to reduce your reliance on slides and turn them off, or use images, and then it forces you actually into telling a story. Now, we've got 5 minutes. All right, this is gold. This really is gold. This is what I realized a few years ago, that if you ask people to, I run a scenario, one of the workshops, where if I've got a room of 20 people and I ask 3 people to leave, and I've got this dual reality moment where the people in the room, I say, look, they're going to come in one at a time, these 3 people, and they're going to explain, they're going to deliver a pitch to you that they've never delivered before. They're only going to have a dry erase marker, and they're going to have nothing else. I'm going to let them see the bullet points they need to tell, and they'll deliver it. And so there's no slides. And but I said, what I don't want you to do is, I don't want you to listen to their pitch, but I want you to look at everything they draw, everything, how they say it. They will create a landmark. They'll draw a building, they'll draw an airplane, they'll draw a restaurant, they'll talk about a meal, they'll add other characters in, they'll do all of this, and they'll also add their own personality, and it would be more memorable. Because as soon as you start using too much content from other people, your personality gets squashed, and you don't get to really have that connection shine through. So the last time I did this, the first person came in, delivered a scenario with a whiteboard dry erase marker, and inserted 3 jokes in his 2-minute pitch. Brilliant. And there was the airplane, there was the McDonald's logo, there was all of this other stuff put in. Second person came in, there's the airplane, there's the plate of food, there are the other characters. There was no humor. It was emotional. It was an emotional story. The third came in, there's the airplane again. I didn't ask for any of this. No humor, no emotion. This is a detailed story. And what I realized is, if you take away the piece of information, that's a lot of the time, we rely too much on other people's content to tell stories, and actually we don't end up telling a story. So get rid of that piece, and then just inject, turn the slides off, and inject as many personal stories as you can, and don't be afraid of using that whiteboard, because that actually will help you create stories. That's a really 2-minute. Connect with me if you want on LinkedIn, and we can talk about it for hours.
And finally, John, just to wrap up the last question, how do you catalog your stories and make them easily available if you've got a large portfolio of solutions, different profiles, personas, etc.?
Video. There are platforms. I don't know whether Consensus could do this, but there are platforms out there that allow you to record really, really short videos and share them across your teams. And it means you can tag them, and you can have a library where you can easily search and find these videos. And even if you left, because a lot of the time organizations have got somebody who's the best, who knows all of the customer stories, and then they leave and you've got none. And video, a really good way of because it's easy, right? It's easier than getting somebody else to type a story, because they're bound to miss something. And if you deliver it verbally, it's very different than if you write it. So there are numerous platforms about. I've got a few, I think, listed on my. Am I allowed to use vendors' names? Are the vendors' names?
I'm sure you can. I mean, you could probably use Consensus as well, but
Consensus. There's CNIT. There's Vocal Video. Those platforms are great for things like that, and they're not that expensive. Vocal Video is very, very reasonably priced.
Perfect. Thank you, John. So just to wrap up, everyone, we're really excited to bring DemoFest on the road as DemoFest X. We had a great time in San Francisco in February, so hopefully you can all join us in London or New York City later this year. John and I will both be in London, so it'd be great to chat to you all. You can register to join us at demofest.com or in the link in today's tabs. Don't forget to visit the booths. And finally, these are the sessions that we've got coming up next. Thank you very much, John. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And you'll be pushed to your next session in about 19 seconds. So thank you, everyone.